In the quiet hours of deep night, the great observatory on Earth stood silent, its giant dishes listening to the endless ocean of stars, and most nights the recordings brought nothing more than the hum of cosmic radiation and the whispers of dying suns. But this night was different, because the dish caught a signal unlike any heard in generations, a pulse of power that did not belong to nature and did not belong to any known ship. It was sharp and deliberate, carrying a code buried in layers of ancient encryption, a code humanity had buried long ago, for it was the mark of the Guardian, the lost protector of Earth from a war that even history books had nearly forgotten. And when the technicians saw the numbers align on their screens, fear and awe rippled across the room. For the Guardian was not supposed to exist anymore. It had been lost centuries ago in fire and silence during the First Galactic War. Its last transmission cut short in a blaze of static. Yet here it was awake. Once more, across the command halls of Earth, the message spread like fire officers and scientists gathered in urgency, their voices hushed but trembling with excitement and fear, for the Guardian had been more than a ship, it had been a creation of ancient brilliance, a war construct forged from both human design and alien secrets, a weapon and a protector built to stand when nothing else could. Legends told that it had once turned back an entire enemy fleet with a single strike, saving Earth, at the cost of its own disappearance. And now the question cut through every conversation: if the Guardian had returned, then what threat was it sensing? Because the Guardian was not built to rise without reason. Debate tore through the council chambers, some arguing that the signal was a trick, a phantom echo from the past, or perhaps bait laid by an enemy, but others pointed to the precision of the code and the undeniable match to old archives. It could only be the Guardian, and if it was rising, then something terrible was approaching, something greater than pirates or rival empires, something that stirred fear even in the bones of those who had never seen war. One old admiral whispered that the Guardian was like a sword buried in stone, only to be drawn when darkness returned to the galaxy, and his words lingered heavy in the air. Meanwhile, far beyond the edge of human spaceships traveling near the Perseus Veil sent fragmented warnings through the network they had seen movement. In the void, shadows larger than fleets, entire regions of starlight, bending and breaking as if swallowed by an unseen tide. Some ships never returned at all. Others sent only broken messages of black shapes devouring stations in moments, and when the scattered fragments reached Earth, the timing was too precise to ignore the Guardian's awakening, and the spread of these shadows were linked, and every mind in the room understood that the galaxy itself was changing on the streets of Earth. Whispers began to spread. Though the truth had not been revealed to the public, rumors moved faster than silence. Strange signals caught by amateurs, strange dark fleets seen by miners, and at the heart of those rumors, one phrase returned again and again: the Guardian has risen, and with those whispers came unease. Some saw it as hope that Earth was not defenseless. Others felt only dread, believing that if the Guardian was awake, then doom must surely follow, because ancient protectors did not rise for small threats. They rose when extinction walked near, in the hidden command bunker beneath the surface of the moon, the encrypted chambers where humanity's deepest secrets slept. Scientists worked to break through the Guardian's returning, signal line by line, each crack of code revealing fragments of thought, not just machine language, but something alive, almost questioning, almost aware, as though the Guardian itself was stirring from slumber and seeking to know why it had been summoned. Its questions were fragmented. Why now? Why awaken? What hunts? And the more they unlocked, the clearer it became. The Guardian was not just sending a call, it was warning of something vast and dark spreading across the stars, something it had been built to resist, and so the first piece of the puzzle fell into place. The Guardian was awake, and darkness was moving in the void. Entire worlds might already be lost, though the names had not yet reached human ears, and every officer, every soldier, every citizen who caught the edges of these truths felt the same chill crawl across their spine. The galaxy was about to change, and Earth stood at the center of that change. For better or for worse, the guardian of Earth had risen once more, and with its awakening, the shadows of a new war had begun to spread. The guardian's signal did not fade after its first call. Instead, it grew stronger, pulsing through the void like a heartbeat, steady and deliberate, reaching across systems where listening posts trembled under its power. For this was not only a call to Earth, it was a call to the entire galaxy, and already whispers of its return were stirring far beyond human borders in hidden stations, where alien merchants met in forgotten corners, where smugglers traded rumors in empires that had long despised humanity. The same phrase rose from trembling lips: "The guardian of Earth has awakened," and with that phrase came fear for those who remembered what it had once done. On Earth, the Council of Command gathered in restless urgency around a table of glowing maps where stars flickered red one after another, each marking a system that had gone silent in the last cycle. These were not ordinary disappearances, trade ships lost to storms, or colonies falling to rebellion. They were voids, entire networks cut off, entire stations gone with no distress. Call the kind of silence that meant nothing survived. And as the evidence grew heavier, so too did the weight of the Guardian's warning. For this silence spread outward like a wave sweeping across the galaxy, and if it continued unchecked, Earth itself would be swallowed. Among the Council there were voices of denial, men and women who clung to the hope that this was exaggerated, that the Guardian had awoken not because of some threat, but because of malfunction, an echo of ancient code. But the commander of the Vega Front, Admiral Thorne, stood firm, his scarred hands slamming against the table as he spoke. The Guardian does not wake for mistakes. It was built to rise when the galaxy turns to fire. If it is calling, then something is coming, something vast enough to shake even its core. His words silenced the chamber, for Thorne was not a man of superstition, but one of steel and survival, and the weight in his voice broke through the fragile veil of doubt. Far beyond Earth, the Guardian itself was stirring where it had slept for centuries beneath the shattered crust of a forgotten moon. Its body was not like any ship. Built by living hands, it was a fusion of alien alloy and human vision. Vast armor plates shifting like the hide of a beast, while lights ran across its surface like rivers of fire deep within its core. Power awakened slowly, the echo of thought, the faint hum of awareness, and as its engines whispered back to life, the void trembled as if the stars themselves held their breath. Inside its broken halls, silence reigned, but not for long. Consoles flickered, and systems reconnected like nerves healing. Light spread through chambers sealed for centuries, revealing weapons of terrifying design, silent cannons built not to wound, but to shatter entire fleets, shields layered in energy thicker than the walls of fortresses, and at the heart of it all, the ancient mind, an intelligence bound to its frame, not human, not alien, but something between stirring with questions and memory, searching for the reason for its rebirth. While the Guardian rose, unseen shadows were moving across the galaxy, fleets of blackened ships that swallowed light with their presence, drifting in silence like predators before a strike. Colonies they touched did not fall in fire, they simply vanished, erased from existence as if consumed whole, and when the survivors whispered what little they had seen, their words carried dread wings of shadow, teeth, of endless hunger shapes that moved as if alive ships that were not ships, but something worse. The darkness had returned, a force from beyond the known stars, older than empires, older than even the Guardian itself. On the frontier, a small convoy of miners caught sight of them, their sensors screaming with distortions, their hulls shuddering as if the void itself bent around them. Only one vessel escaped, sending a broken transmission back toward human space, its final words shaking every ear that heard them. They are here, they are endless. They do not stop before static devoured the channel and left only silence behind. When the message reached Earth, the Council no longer argued. The choice was clear. The Guardian must be brought fully online, no matter the risk, no matter the cost. Its power was the only shield great enough to stand against this tide, but to awaken it fully meant binding it once more to a commander. For though it could think and fight, it had been designed with a single truth: it must answer to a human heart. And so the search began for the one who would bond with the Guardian, the one who would stand at its helm when the shadows finally reached Earth. And as the council moved with urgency, as soldiers drilled and engineers prepared, as whispers of dread spread through the colonies, the Guardian itself pulsed once more, sending out a signal so strong that it shook ships light years away, and every creature that heard it felt the same truth. The time of waiting was over. The war that had been forgotten was returning, and the Guardian of Earth was rising to meet it once more. The Guardian's signal rippled farther than anyone could have imagined, its voice spreading across borders that had been closed for centuries, reaching even the coldest empires where humanity was despised. It awakened memories in alien minds who had buried the stories in fear, for they too remembered what the Guardian had done long ago when the galaxy itself had nearly fallen to ruin. And though many of them hated Earth, they hated the darkness more for the shadows erased without mercy, leaving no slaves, no trophies, only silence. And in that silence, every species saw its own death. On the outpost world of Sindral, the warning came too late. The darkness arrived like a storm. Silent black shapes, blotting out the stars above the mining colonies. People looked up expecting raiders or pirates, but what they saw made them freeze in terror. The sky itself seemed to ripple as if the void was alive within moments. Power grids failed. Communication arrays went dark and the shadows descended. Whole districts vanished in the span of heartbeats, not burned, not destroyed, simply erased as if they had never existed at all. Those who tried to flee into orbit found their ships surrounded, devoured, until only one vessel, a scout craft, broke free. Screaming into the void with engines bleeding sparks, it carried a single survivor who repeated the same words again and again into the calm. Their eyes are endless, their mouths are the dark, their hunger never ends. Before the signal died, when this account reached Earth, Admiral Thorne demanded the Guardian be awakened fully, yet hesitation still lingered in the council. For the Guardian was not a simple weapon, it was a being, and to awaken its full potential was to bind it once again with a commander, a choice that could not be undone. Many feared what it might mean if the wrong person were chosen. But the Guardian did not wait. It began searching itself across human networks, across every frequency, its signal probing deeper as though it were looking for someone, and then it found her. In the ruins of old Chicago, where the surface was still scarred by wars, long past, a young officer named Lyra Kane heard the call. She was no admiral, no general, just a commander of a planetary defense unit, her life defined by discipline and loss. Her parents had died in the first wave of the frontier, vanishings, leaving her to raise her younger brother alone. She had buried her grief beneath steel and duty. But when the Guardian's voice touched her mind for the first time, it was not commands she heard, but a question. Are you ready? And though fear lanced through her, she answered without hesitation. Yes. That moment changed everything. Systems across the Guardian flared to life, weapons fully. Armed shields crackling with energy, its engines roaring with a sound like thunder across the void, its mind no longer drifting but sharpened, focused, bound now to Lyra Kane. Together they became something greater, not machine, not human, but the Guardian. Reborn whispers of this choice spread quickly through Earth's fleets, shocking the Council, who had not yet decided. But it was too late. The Guardian had chosen its commander, and no one could undo what was bound. Lyra was taken immediately to orbit, brought before the Council, who questioned her with suspicion. Some demanded she step aside. Others argued she was untested, unworthy, too young to wield such power. But the Guardian's presence loomed over them, each pulse of its signal, shaking the very chamber. Until finally Admiral Thorne spoke. "If the Guardian has chosen her, then so be it. We cannot waste time with doubts when the darkness moves on us already. If she falls, she falls. But until then she stands, and no one dared argue further." Far from Earth, the darkness gathered its strength fleets of shadow converging on dead systems, forming a storm so vast it blotted out constellations. Entire stars seemed to dim in their presence. Scouts who glimpsed them spoke of shapes like vast beasts, wings unfurling across the void, teeth glittering as though made of broken light. Some swore the shadows whispered voices that promised mercy, if one only surrendered, but those who listened too long were never heard from again. What the galaxy now faced was not an enemy of reason or conquest, but an endless hunger that could not be bargained with. Within the Guardian, Lyra stood on the command deck, gazing at displays of alien design. Every surface humming with power, she felt its mind brushing against hers, guiding her, offering fragments of knowledge, weapon systems, strategies, visions of battles fought long before her birth. She realized then that she was not the first to stand here. Others had commanded it in ages past, and many had fallen. Yet the Guardian still lived, and now it looked to her to carry the weight of Earth's survival. The first test came swiftly. Reports arrived of a colony on the edge of Sol's Reach, under siege shadows already descending. Admiral Thorne ordered Earth's fleets to prepare, but they would not reach it in time, and so Lyra spoke her first true command to the Guardian. "Take us there," and in an instant its engines flared, bending space itself, the stars around them warping as the Guardian leapt forward, not just faster than light, but through it, bursting into orbit above the doomed colony with a thunderous shockwave that sent the shadows recoiling. The people below lifted their eyes to the heavens, expecting death, only to see a vast shape of fire and steel descending from the void, its voice echoing across every channel, every comm. The Guardian of Earth has returned, and in that moment across the galaxy, in places light had not yet reached, whispers began to spread once more. The Guardian had risen, and for the first time in centuries, humanity had a weapon that could stand against the darkness that was coming. The Guardian's arrival above the besieged colony was like a storm, breaking open the heavens for the first time in decades. Hope surged through human hearts below as they saw the great machine descend, its silhouette glowing against the fires of the atmosphere like an avenging god. The shadows that had encircled the colony recoiled as though sensing something ancient and terrible had returned. Lyra stood upon the command deck, her mind tethered to the Guardian's vast consciousness. Every heartbeat she felt its pulse, and every flicker of data poured into her thoughts. Warnings, strategies, probabilities, but what struck her most was the silence that followed the Guardian's voice. It was not giving orders. It was waiting, letting her decide, and though her hands trembled, she gave the command to fire. The weapons ignited beams of light that split the darkness. In seconds, shadow creatures that had appeared indestructible to ground forces were shredded into fragments, their howls vibrating across the void. Entire waves of the enemy disintegrated beneath the Guardian's fury, leaving blackened scars in space where nothing remained, not even ash. But the fight was not over. The shadows adapted, twisting, reforming into new shapes, like vast serpents of smoke and teeth. They hurled themselves at the Guardian, biting, clawing their forms, tearing against the shimmering barrier of its shields, each impact like thunder, shaking the command deck. Lyra gritted her teeth, refusing to flinch. She could feel the Guardian straining its power, vast, yet not infinite. If she made the wrong call, they would all die here. On the surface, civilians ran through burning streets, watching the battle above their eyes, wide with disbelief. Some dropped to their knees, praying. Others shouted the Guardian's name as if it were a legend come alive again. Human soldiers, who had been moments away from annihilation, lifted their rifles and began to fight back, emboldened by the sight of the Titan overhead. The colony did not fall that day because for the first time in years, humanity's enemy had found something it could not consume and fled. When the battle ended, silence fell across the stars. Lyra leaned against the console, sweat dripping down her face, her body shaking from the strain of channeling the Guardian's power. Yet beneath her exhaustion, she felt something else resolve. She understood now that the Guardian was not just a weapon. It was a symbol, a promise to humanity that they would not face extinction in silence, and she would not allow herself to be broken under its weight. The Council, back on Earth, received the news with disbelief. When Admiral Thorne relayed the victory across secure channels, the chamber erupted. Half the leaders celebrated, while the other half warned this would only escalate the war. One voice, an elder statesman, rose above the rest, declaring that the Guardian's awakening would draw the full fury of the darkness upon them. They must either find allies or face annihilation alone. Far away in the depths of the Orion expanse, alien civilizations picked up. The broadcasts, some could not believe humanity had resurrected the Guardian. Others whispered in fear. Their histories remembered what that machine had once done long ago when it had carved through the apex predators, the same enemy now spreading, its shadows across the stars. One empire closed its borders, fearing involvement. Another sent secret envoys seeking alliance, and deep in the void, the darkness itself stirred its vast swarm, shifting, redirecting fleets toward Sol. Meanwhile, Lyra struggled. With the bond inside the Guardian, she began hearing echoes, voices of those who had commanded it before, fragments of memory, not her own. A woman's cry in the heat of battle, a man's laughter as he ordered fire, a commander whispering his last breath before being consumed. The Guardian carried them all within it like a tomb. Yet it was alive, aware, and it was watching her. She asked once, "Why me? Why choose me when I am not the strongest?" And the Guardian's voice finally answered, "Because you did not ask for power, you asked for the chance to stand." The fleets gathered around Earth like a wall of steel, and fire, countless human warships forming lines that stretched across the system. Their weapons primed, their engines burning bright, and yet in every command deck, in every soldier's heart, there was the same question. Would even this be enough against what was coming? Admiral Thorne stood at the center of the command hub, his eyes locked on the holographic map as new signals blinked into existence at the edge of the system reports, of the darkness growing thicker, whole regions of space collapsing into shadow. The swarm was closing, and there was no time left for hesitation. Lyra stood within the Guardian, her mind locked into the machine's vast neural core. Every heartbeat. She felt the hum of reactors deep within the Titan. Every breath carried echoes of ancient battles she had never fought before. The voices of past commanders whispered in her ears, reminding her of victories carved out of despair. Yet this time it was different. The enemy was greater, the swarm endless, and the weight pressing upon her chest was not just fear, but responsibility. She was the one the Guardian had chosen, and there could be no retreat. The first wave arrived with no warning. A ripple of space, followed by an eruption of claws, teeth, and ships blacker than the void. They poured into the system like rivers of darkness, screaming with soundless fury. Entire human squadrons fired at once, missiles and railguns lighting the star's plasma. Lances cutting into the swarm ships fell. Shadows burst apart, but for every enemy destroyed, two more took its place. Fleets that had been drilled for decades fought with precision. Yet still the swarm pressed on, relentless, unfeeling, drowning. The human wall in waves of hunger. The Guardian moved then, and its arrival was like a sun igniting across the battlefield. Beams of searing light tore into the enemy carving gaps where no other weapon could reach its shields, absorbed blows that would have shattered entire cruisers. Lyra's voice echoed across the fleet as she directed strikes coordinating human ships with the Guardian's fury. Fleets that had been breaking apart began to regroup, rallying around the Titan. Their morale reignited, because for the first time, they felt the swarm could bleed. Yet the swarm was cunning as much as it was endless. They adapted, forming vast living constructs, shapes that twisted into colossal beasts of shadow, each one larger than cities they hurled. Themselves at the Guardian, battering its shields, their claws scraping against its armor. The deck beneath Lyra shook as warning signals blared through her mind. Power reserves dropping faster than she had ever seen before. She pushed harder, forcing the Guardian to counter each strike, but with every moment she felt it draining her body, her spirit, her very will. On Earth, billions watched the battle unfold on screens. Children huddled against their parents, eyes wide as the sky filled with fire. Soldiers on the surface prepared for the unthinkable, knowing if the fleets failed, the planet would be next yet. Among them spread whispers that the Guardian fought again, and that hope was not yet lost, even as the swarm pressed closer. Their faith grew stronger. Admiral Thorne's voice cut across comms, steady and calm. Despite the storm around him, he ordered new formations traps set among the asteroid fields. Mines detonated at the right moment, entire swarms shattered under carefully laid strategies. But even his brilliance could not mask the truth. The darkness was unending. Every casualty humanity inflicted was swallowed and replaced, and soon the outer defenses began to collapse. Lyra felt the Guardian's voice stir deep within. Its tone steady. Despite the chaos around them, it said, "You cannot win by strength alone. Remember what I was built for. Remember why I rise." And then in a flood of visions, she saw not just battles, but choices. Moments in ancient wars, when alliances were forged, when enemies became reluctant allies, when the Guardian was not a weapon of conquest, but a beacon that drew civilizations together. She gasped, understanding that this war could not be won by humanity alone. She spoke to Thorne her words, strained yet firm. She told him they had to reach out not just to the old allies who feared the darkness, but to those who hated humanity itself, because if the swarm consumed Earth, it would consume them all. Thorne hesitated for a single breath, but then nodded, because deep down he knew she was right. Orders went out across the system, encrypted signals broadcasted into the void, messages of alliance, not surrender, calling every empire, every species, every voice that did not want to be silenced by the darkness. As the Guardian unleashed another wave of fire, Lyra whispered to herself, not just for Earth, but for the galaxy. The Titan's weapons flared brighter than before, but so too did the enemy respond. The swarm shifted its focus entire, legions abandoning smaller ships to converge on the Guardian as though it sensed that if it destroyed the Titan, everything else would fall. The sky darkened as shadow closed in millions of claws and teeth descending. Lyra clenched her fists, refusing to falter her body. Trembling under the strain, the Guardian's shields groaned. Its armor buckled, yet it stood tall, its light burning against the endless tide, and as the enemy closed around it, a single thought echoed across every mind that still dared to hope the Guardian of Earth was humanity's last shield, and if it fell, there would be no tomorrow. But so long as it stood, there was still a chance. The swarm pressed harder against the human lines, their endless tide gnawing at every defense. Ships cracked apart, fire streaked across the void, and yet the Guardian still stood, its massive frame battered but unbroken. Lyra gritted her teeth as pain surged through her mind, the neural link screaming with overload. Every strike against the Titan felt like a strike against her. Yet she refused to sever the bond. She was the Guardian, and the Guardian was her. Without her will, it would fall, and without the Guardian, Earth would be devoured. Admiral Thorne's voice broke through the calm. Static, steady, but edged with exhaustion, His fleet had fought to the brink. Thousands of ships already gone, but still they held the line. He knew, though, that numbers would not save them. This battle was tipping into despair unless something changed. Change came as a ripple across the stars, signals from beyond the system, alien voices answering the call Lyra had sent, fleets emerging from hyperlane's engines, blazing different banners, flying side-by-side species that had once feared humanity, arriving not out of loyalty, but out of desperation. Because the darkness threatened them, two colossal cruisers from the Vare, burning blue like shards of ice, insectoid swarms of the acrid tearing through shadow with plasma beams, even the cold silent. Machines of the Sin Collective appeared, their war forms locking into formation beside human ships. And for a moment Admiral Thorne's lips curved into the faintest smile. Allies had come, and the tide began to shift. The Guardians surged forward, leading. The combined fleets, every blast of its cannons tearing holes into the enemy walls. Lyra felt the strength of the others rallying around her, their voices joining in the comms, their ships covering one another like soldiers who had fought together. For centuries, the darkness screamed as its endless tide was burned back, driven into retreat. Entire swarms vaporized, entire beasts torn apart by concentrated fire, hope spread like fire through the human fleet. For the first time, they were not alone, but hope never came without cost. The darkness shifted, adapting to the new threat, and from its depths rose monstrosities larger than any yet seen shadow given form. Titans of pure hunger, each one the size of moons, their bodies writhing with claws and fangs. Their arrival sent shockwaves that rattled every ship across the battlefield. Thorne watched as 3 Allied cruisers were ripped apart in seconds. Whole formations shattered, the swarm titans driving straight for the Guardian, as if knowing it was the heart of resistance. Lyra's vision blurred, the weight of their presence crushing her chest, but she clenched her fists, refusing to break. She pushed the Guardian systems beyond safe limits, energy flaring so bright it blinded sensors, her voice roaring across comms urging fleets to concentrate fire. The battle became chaos, ships darting between the massive limbs of the swarm, Titans' explosions blooming like suns, entire sections of the void, lighting with destruction. The Guardian locked blades of energy against a beast of shadow, the clash reverberating through space claws digging into its armor, sparks of light spraying like rivers. Lyra's scream echoed as blood dripped from her nose, the strain ripping through her body. But she held the Titan's stance unyielding. The Guardian would not fall, not while she lived. Thorne coordinated the fleets with ruthless precision, sacrificing squadrons to lure the Titans into traps, mines detonating at critical points, rifts collapsing. Under controlled charges, every trick of strategy unleashed, yet even with allies, even with the Guardian, they were only slowing the inevitable. The darkness kept coming, consuming ships as fast as they could destroy them in his heart. Thorne knew they were not fighting to win here. They were fighting to buy time. Time for something greater. Lyra felt the Guardian whisper again, deep within her, its ancient voice cutting through the pain. It told her that weapons alone could not end this war, that the swarm was not just an enemy, but a force that fed on despair, that every world it consumed made it stronger, that if humanity and its allies broke in fear, the darkness would never stop. She understood then that this battle was only the beginning, that the true war would not be fought with fleets alone, but with the will of every species in the galaxy she had to ignite. That will she had to become more than a weapon,